Hello again, this is the quarter scale Sopwith Pup1 Balsa USA kit that I've been building. This is the fuselage section all made up now. I didn't actually video all of this because it's fairly general construction methods used, and if you want to see exactly how it was done you can look on my website to look at the pictures I provided there. What I have done though, while I'm videoing this as well, is I've actually incorporated a closed loop system onto this model as per the original, and this was going to be used, push rods were going to be used for this, but I wanted to make it as scale as possible as mentioned before. And here you can see I've got the closed loop system made up and installed. These are for the elevators, and if I just pan down a bit you can see the system for the rudder. The elevators runs along and exits the side of the fuselage and the top of the fuselage, and then carries on to the elevators, and the rudder section obviously runs right through to the back of the plane and exits around this area here. As you can see, I've also built in the scale tail section. It's not 100% scale, but it's a good representation, and you can also see the horns that I've made out of Prexlon ready to go into the elevators. They're just all kept in there at the moment with the wires until we get to that stage of the build. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the actual little push rods that will operate the closed loop system, and they will actually go in and around this area just inside here. So if you bear with me, we'll start looking at how I'm going to construct that. Thank you. Right, now what we're going to do now is we're going to start trying to install our servo tray to receive our servos that are going to obviously push our push rods that link to the closed loop system. What I've done here, I've got two pieces of spruce, square spruce, okay, and these have to fit in along here and one along here. I've also got two dowels cut to size roughly at the moment, and they're going to be how take the push rods, and these are the actual push rods, which are 3mm, and they'll be made up once we got the servo tray in. Okay, the next thing to do, as I say, is to mark these off and get them situated inside the fuselage so that they're low enough that they miss the top of the wing. So what I generally do is I just put a piece of something flat, I'll cut these to size, and then get a servo and just make sure the top of the servo doesn't catch, it's low enough. And we want to keep it as low as possible because when we come to doing the cockpit area, I've got a pilot to go in, so I don't want the push rods to interfere, or his feet to interfere with the push rods. Right, we've cut our spruce spars to hold the servo tray into place. I'll just pan in and show you. Just see down there, there's one there and there's one there. Then what we need to do is we need to get a bit of ply, which is here. We need to cut that to size, which I've already done, and pop it in there, just make sure it fits nice and tidily on there. Then what we need to do is, with one of our servos, we need to just lay that in position, and then with a pen decide where we want them to go. I'm going to open this up quite wide because it keeps it nice and light as well. Just mark, and probably better to do it with a pencil, either end, just enough to give it some clearance so the servo can fit in. Then what we do is we go away and we'll draw that all up with our set square, marking out exactly where we want the lines to go. Okay, so in a second you'll see that all done. Right, as you can see now, I've done the servo tray, I've cut that cut out. I'll just pan in a little bit better so you can see. And there our servos, and I just check, just make sure it's nice and even all the way across. and then we can move our servo exactly where it needs to be in relation to the push rods. The other thing we need to do at this stage is just check that the push rods are going to actually fit in with where the servo is mounted, and all I do is just generally as a rough guide, again I will just put the piece of dowel in line with that, and then put another one just on top in roughly the same location, just to check that that's going to work. And this actually says that I need to move this down a little bit, so all I'll do is I'll move my spruce spars down, same on this side, give me a rough indication again of where it needs to be, and I think this now will probably be near enough there in relation to where we want the push rods to be. And that's quite good, and that gives me enough clearance for what I need. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll mark them now, and then I'll glue the spars into position, spruce spars in position. Again, we've got quite a lot of extra here, so I'll probably cut this off somewhere along here and remove this section here, because again we need to be thinking about getting our fuel tank in as well, so we need to make sure there's enough clearance there for that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now. Alright, you can see I've glued in the spruce spars that are going to hold the servo tray. These little pieces here are just a couple of pieces to keep everything square. It worked out quite nicely that the little gap I had, I could run these underneath, push the spars up, and that keeps everything perfectly square. The other thing I've done as well is I've put some spruce spars on the underside of the servo tray, so when the servo sits in, these can actually be screwed into as well, and it gives it a bit more rigidity as well. Okay, that's all got to wait to dry now, and then we'll come back to this again in a minute. Right, the spruce spars have dried now, and I've got the servo tray in. I've put a couple of screws in either end to hold it all in position. Again, I'm not going to glue the servo tray in because I secured it with some servo screws which are long enough to go all the way through, and this enables me that if I do have problems and I need to get to the tank fits quite nicely, but if I need to get in there and get it out to do any work on it, it's nice to be able to just unscrew the servo tray, lift it to one side, and then do the work, and it all should fit back in neatly afterwards. So I've got this very small little hand screwdriver, and all I've done is with a scrap piece of spruce, I've just marked roughly where it should be, and in the centre of that I just get my little hand screwdriver drill, and then just work it through, apply and into the spruce. It comes through, which it has now. Just pop it out. And then find myself a servo screw. It's about 3/4 of an inch long. And that will just pop on. Handy tip is try and find yourself a little magnetic screwdriver, and then, because they're quite fiddly, they won't, if they do come out the hole, they won't drop off into the fuselage, and you spend ages trying to hook them out. Okay, so it's just a case now of screwing that all in. Like so. I've just got one more to do on the other side, and then I'll come back. Right, I've got my servo tray, and as mentioned earlier, one of the servos is now in, and as you can see, it's got one of the push rods linked up to it. I've made the push rods off video because they take a little bit of time, and as you'll see in a minute I'll show you how to bind one to make sure it's nice and tight. They take a little bit of time, and I just didn't want to spend a lot of time on this because it's quite simple to do. So what I'll do is I'll just turn the camera around, and what we have here is we have some twine. I've pre-drilled a hole where the push rod's got to go, so what I will do is I will push the twine through, as you can see, and then I'll get my push rod and push that into place like so. I've also grooved out as well, I don't know if you can see here, there you go, a groove where the rod can sit, so as I tie it and bind it, and it's just a case of running the bind round. Quite hard to show you this and keep in focus with the video, so bear with me. And it's just a case of, once you've got it started, all you need to do is keep running the twine round nice and closely together until you come towards the end. Okay. So what we're looking for is that effect, and we just need to run that all to the end. So I'll finish off doing that and then I'll come back in a second. Okay, so that's the push rod bound. Now to make sure that doesn't come off, what I use is epoxy. So what I've already mixed some epoxy up, and what I'll do is get a nice lot of epoxy on your stick, and then it's just a case of placing the epoxy round, working it into the twine. Keep it as thin as possible, make sure it goes in, because I want to keep the weight down as much as possible. And it's just a case now, there's quite a lot on here so we can work it around. Don't worry about the loose ends at the minute because we can cut them off afterwards. Okay. And let's just keep working around. I use 5 minutes here because 5 minutes is ample time to get this done. Just mixing up a small batch each time I want to do a job like this. You have to excuse me if this has gone out of shot a little bit because I'm concentrating on doing that and trying to keep my eyes on the camera. But there, we're nearly there now. And then it's just a case of leaving it to one side to dry. I'm just going to get a small amount more. It's a little bit dry around here. This is where I've just looped off to finish off. So that's pretty good. And that, once dry, will be very secure. So all that leaves me to do now is just set that to one side and let it cure. You'll also note as well, because I've stepped this push rod so it gives me the right angle, so I want to keep it as low as possible. Because I've bent it like so, it will under strain pull slightly, so that's why I put the brass plate, soldered a brass plate. You can see how that was done on the website, just so that once now that will be totally secure. They cannot pull, those bends cannot pull now, they're nice and tight. So that's just a little thing I like to do because this is rather a large model and it's got quite big elevator services, so we don't want any resistance being lost through these pulling out in flight, so that's why I've done this. Again, it's very simple to do. Look at the website. Right, we now have the servo tray in place. As you can see, we have our elevator servo, our rudder servo, we have our push rods, and they are linked up to their respective closed loop systems, which we can see down here. The top one's the rudder, and the one just slightly below is the elevator. That really is all I can do now until we get the rear stabiliser and elevators in place and rudder in place to link these all up. But as you can see, it's quite a tidy little configuration. If I just get a screwdriver and point down there, this is where I'm probably going to put my 2.4 receiver, and the throttle servo will probably go forward onto the firewall, because this is a petrol engine. I haven't quite worked out really how that configuration will work, because it's an OR engine and the linkages look quite complicated, so I'll have to have a think about that one and try and work that out later. But for now, I'm quite happy with all that. If I come down here, you can see that sits quite low within the fuselage. Obviously this is upside down, and I've got all this area around here that I can fit my pilot seat in and put my pilot in. If I just pan round to the back, you can see as well there's plenty of room just here and the other side here, but when he's in there, because he's a full size quarter scale pilot, he'll sit quite nicely with his feet either side and they won't interrupt with any of the push rods. Okay, thanks for watching this part so far. There'll be more to come when we start mounting the engine.